This is the BiggerPockets Podcast, show 239. Miss me, people?
You're listening to BiggerPockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.
What's going on, everybody? This is Josh Dorkin, host to the BiggerPockets Podcast, here with my co-host, Mr. Brandon Turner. What's up, man? Back in the saddle, baby.
Look who's back from his 9-week trip around the world. Okay.
Look who's back in the house. What?
Is that a
I
song?
don't know. I think it is.
You and your
there's
80s,
a lot of bad
90s
words.
references. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was like Dr. Dre or something. Which was in the 90s, sadly, but yeah.
Yeah, you and your 90s music. Anyway, how you doing? You're back from a
what's
trip?
up, man?
Did you have a good time?
You did not get any uglier, so it's all good.
That's really tough to get uglier when you're already looking like this. It doesn't get much worse, so...
Oh, stop.
Anyway,
you have selective beauty. So.
I have, my mom thinks I'm really handsome, so that's all that counts in my world.
Brandon, you're a good-looking guy, man. It's all good.
Oh, thanks, Josh. You want my number?
Hey, baby, how you doing?
How you doing? You went around the western half of the U.S.
I went on vacation.
Weird.
My wife, my three kin, and I jumped into an RV. And we circumnavigated Northern America. It was amazing, man. We had a phenomenal time. I'll give you a very, very quick and dirty catch up. Catch up. We went up towards Mount Rushmore. We went to Crazy Horse, which is like phenomenal. We were at Rushmore on July 3rd, which was probably the most patriotic thing I'd ever experienced in my life. It was really, really, really cool. Cool. From Rushmore, we went up to Devil's Tower, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Place.
So cool. We then went up to Glacier National Park, which is just probably one of the most gorgeous places I've ever been. Had a great time, hiked, boated, did all sorts of fun stuff. Linked up with fellow podcaster and friend of both of ours, Peter Awad.
Yep.
Which was awesome.
What's this show? It's the Slow Hustle podcast.
Slow Hustle
right?
podcast. Yeah, great show. Yep. Met Pete. Went down to Yellowstone, saw all the cool stuff, had animals everywhere. It was just like...
I saw your picture of there's a big buffalo or whatever.
We had a buffalo like 10 feet away from us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bananas. These places, if you've never been, you have to go see these places. They're just stunning. Went to Grand Teton National Park, which, again, absolutely stunning. And then, a bunch of other places on the way back. But it was amazing. There were lots of great stories, including the blue the blue mess.
So Josh,
if you ever saw the movie RV,
I never saw it, but you texted me that night and you said you were cleaning under the RV and you unscrewed some cap that you shouldn't have done, and you were covered in human stuff. Yeah. So Josh texts me and he says, "Any idea how to get blue sewer sludge staying off of a driveway?" So, of course, being the good friend that I am, I took a screenshot of the text message and then put it on my Instagram.
And put it on his Instagram and got a good laugh out of it. Yeah.
Well, I laugh at your misfortune. It's what I do.
It's all good. Yeah, my wife and I were kind of like in a debate in the morning, and when we cleaned out a tank, we forgot to close the tank. I capped it, but we didn't close the actual tank, and then it got filled with some fluid, water, but I'm not going to gross you guys out, but I had like 3 to 5 gallons of blue sludge explode all over my body. Brandon, and now hundreds of thousands of other people will get a good laugh. But yeah, great trip. Anyway, I'm back.
You're back.
I'm back. It's good to be back, man.
And it's a good show to be back on. Today we have a really good show with a guy who achieved this financial freedom. He loves to travel and do a lot of what Josh is doing, like hiking around and doing cool stuff like that.
32
years old. He achieved financial freedom through rental properties. Has over 100 units. You guys are going to hear a story today, so hang tight for that. But before we get to it,
and it is attainable, by the way. I mean, like this guy, he's not doing anything crazy. He's just being really smart, methodical, and if you want to achieve this. I mean, this is a fantastic show to listen to.
Yeah, you'll love it. But before we get to the show, let's get to today's quick tip. Today's quick tip is something that I mentioned later in the show as well, but I'll say it here. If you go to the BiggerPockets forums, biggerpockets.com/forums, at the top in the navigation bar, which, by the way, the navigation bar is changing right now, so you'll probably see some changes to that. But in the navigation bar at the top, you're going to see a tab that says trending. I would highly recommend click on it and check it out. There's always some really good conversations happening in there. It's actually where we usually pull the fire round questions later in the show from. But yeah, go see what's popular. What are the hot conversations on BiggerPockets right now in the real estate space? You'll find some really good conversations in there. And you can chime in and offer your input or just kind of read and see what other people are doing. There's a quick tip.
Awesome. Great. All right, guys, this is show 239 of the BiggerPockets podcast. You can check out the show notes at biggerpockets.com/show 239. That's biggerpockets.com/show 239. With that, if you're enjoying the show, if you're enjoying the podcast, get out there, share this podcast with your friends. This show today is about financial freedom. Who do you know that has been talking about it, that needs a kick in the pants? Financial freedom. Who is it? We all know somebody. We all know multiple people. Tell them about it. Pass this along. Send a link to them. Share it with them. Help change their life. Help transform their life. Help transform. What? What?
Different type of show, Josh.
I've been gone for a while. What have I been doing? Help transform their life by sharing this. BiggerPockets.com/show 239.
Wow.
With that, let's get into this thing.
I'm still stuck on transport.
I don't know where that came from. Today's show is a fantastic show. We talk about financial freedom. We talk about figuring out your end goal, reverse engineering in order to accomplish and get to that end goal, buying real estate in bulk. We cover dozens and dozens of topics within here. Today's guest is Austin. Let me not butcher this. Hold on.
You're gonna butcher
Fruechting. Austin Fruechting.
I asked him if it like sting like a bee, and he said yes. Fruechting.
Yes.
Even though it does not look like that at all. But
in the KC area, and he's killing it. This guy is absolutely crushing it, and has lots of stuff to share. So let's bring him on. Austin, welcome to the show, man. It's good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Yeah, this should be fun. So let's talk about your story. I mean, today we're talking a little bit about financial freedom. I know that's a big theme around BiggerPockets and around your life. So, but before we get there, let's go into how did you get started with real estate investing? Walk us through that journey.
Okay, yeah, back in the fall of 2009, a friend of mine was like, dude, you really need to check out Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so I read that as like, okay, all this makes a lot of sense. So then I ran out a huge spreadsheet projecting financial projections for every scenario I could think of for like the next 30 plus years. And in every one of them, no matter how I sliced it up, putting the most amount of money into real estate investing got me to financial freedom much faster than any other method. So then I went to the bookstore. I think I spent like $300 and just bought like every real estate book possible, started pouring over it. And then July 30th, 2010 was when I closed on my first property.
Okay.
And just since then, we've kept acquiring.
Cool.
So that's 9 months from, hey, you should read Rich Dad. You've gone and you've bought your first property.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because, so many would-be investors have that same first conversation that you guys had. And what follows is not a property in their hands 9 months later. It's, perseverating, it's fear, it's, all these different things that happen for different people. How is it, and, obviously we'll dive in on that property, but how was it that you were able to really get yourself to that first property from a mental perspective? What did you need to go through to get there?
20 or 30 books and just pouring over every resource that I could. I mean, I just cranked through anything I could get my hands on as quickly as I could. I've never liked reading, but man, I could just sit down and read real estate book after real estate book after real estate book. And so you
were motivated and excited. I mean, there was that motivation.
Yeah,
Well, but okay, so let me rephrase the question, because again, I think everyone else who's in that same position is also motivated and excited, right? But there's that thing that stops them. I think in most cases, Brandon, you and I have talked about this for years and years and years. It's typically some kind of fear. It's fear of stepping into the unknown. It's fear of the all the things that can go wrong. Did you have fear, or did you never have any fear? You're just like, I'm going to do it. I know enough that I need to know, and I'm ready. Was it just that knowledge for you made it so fear didn't even exist?
Well, I mean, pretty much. I mean, I wouldn't really say that I was fearful going in at all, because I would always, run my numbers really conservatively. So if I thought something was going to be between 200 and 300 for this expense, it was always 300 on my paper. Yep. So every expense got, I would use the higher of all the numbers, and then just made sure I had a buffer behind for any CapEx stuff that might come up, and I mean, I think the fear is always going to be conquered by knowledge.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like if you're fearful of something, there's something you don't know. There's something you're uncertain of.
Yeah.
And so figure out what the root of your fear is, and then you'll know what inadequacies you have in your education.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then seek out those answers.
I think that's great. And I think the two examples you gave, the CapEx and the assumptions on expenses, picking the highest, I think that's a fantastic thing that everybody should do.
Yeah.
On CapEx, again, that's something where so many new investors and even experienced investors, they're like, oh, well, I may not hold it for 30 years. The roof's going to be fine. Yeah, I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to worry about that. And, all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I have no money. I have no reserves to take care of the new boiler or whatever else it is, because they didn't think it through. But if you plan, like you're saying, if you've got that plan, you really think about it, you map it out. Like the only thing that can go wrong is, you had to do X, Y, and Z to get to that next step. All the steps you need to take, right?
Yeah. It's like some of the stuff might, kind of my worst case, I was thinking some of the big stuff might come up a little earlier than I would prefer it to happen. But I mean, the big stuff's going to happen. So
cool.
Awesome.
As long as you're prepared.
Great.
I agree. And again, I love that tip too about, staying conservative in your numbers. It's really easy to want to fudge them, especially when you're having trouble finding a deal. It's like, I'll go with the lowest number. So anyway, I think that's a really good tip. So let's talk about that first deal. What was that? I mean, what was your very first investment?
Okay, so I'm going to back up just one step. My final semester of college, I negotiated a deal to buy just a little retail business in this little community right outside of Kansas City. And so I went straight into taking over that. Was able to get it seller financed. They were ready to retire and move on. And so my first property was actually the building next door to that retail business. So it was a commercial building. But that's just a little of the backstory of why I was even interested in that at all, was kind of to also control the space and what's happening around my existing business. So
that's a great idea. And what kind of business was it, really quick?
It was a flower shop.
Really?
You're a florist.
Yeah. I grew up on a farm, and then I worked construction during college, and then I bought a flower shop. I think that's the logical progression.
You're a tough guy
for that. Yeah. I mean, my desire to do entrepreneurship was, much greater than what the actual business was.
Sure.
So,
look, was it a good business, the flower business?
I mean, it made some money. So, I mean, it wasn't like a huge exploding, that's also why they were looking to sell or finance, some of those smaller retail shops that can support you if you're the owner and manager. It's hard to find buyers for those.
Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. So you bought, the first deal was a commercial deal, and it was the building next to your flower shop.
Yeah. And it had a couple, had two commercial spaces and then a lot of little apartments on the upper floors. And and it had been neglected for a long time. So we had to do a lot of work to the commercial spaces, and then over time we started working a little bit on the on some of the apartments.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I was gonna say, how did you put that together? Like, how did you finance that? I mean, you're just out of college here, and all of a sudden you're buying a commercial investment property.
Well, it's in a smaller downtown, so it was. I think the purchase price was like $135, $140.
Okay.
But we immediately put probably
Kansas City?
60. Yeah, just outside of Kansas
Okay.
City. Like I can get there. I live in downtown Kansas City now, and I can get there in 40 minutes.
Okay.
So
you paid 140-ish for it.
yeah, and then we immediately put about 60 into it as soon as we got it, and that just got the commercial spaces up and going, and got those rented out, and then worked on the apartments later. And another thing that I had done, thanks to some of Kiyosaki's stuff, was I had gone around and like talked to some banks about setting up lines of credit before I ever had a property on the horizon at all. Mm-hmm. Like just to have more liquidity, more safety net, to be able to pull from and do some of these projects.
So is that where you finance the $60K?
Yeah, most of that came from just lines of credit. We had some cash sitting around, but a lot of it came from probably 2/3 of it came from just lines of credit.
Well, and really quickly, sorry, Brandon.
Go ahead. I think we're having the same question.
I'm back from a few weeks, so I'm sharp, man. I'm sharp. All right, so for somebody who hears this, they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. It's great to be able to have access to that capital. How do I, as a newbie or somebody who's never done that, go to a bunch of banks and get lines of credit? Yep. What do I need to do?
Go to the bank and just talk to people and ask them for lines of credit until they give them to you.
Who do you talk to at the bank?
I had a couple, some smaller banks that I knew that I would, just contact one person that I'd made a connection with through the business, or on some of them I've just walked in and just said, hey, I'm looking for this. So, and they'll direct you. Person at the front desk will point you wherever you need to go.
Just find the best looking teller and go ask her.
Yeah.
That's great, Brandon. So is it literally like, hey, I'm looking to get into the real estate business. I'm going to be doing a bunch of projects. I'd love to get a line of credit so I can have access to capital so I can work on these projects. I mean, is that kind of the conversation that you're having?
I didn't tell them why I was going to need it or what I was planning on using it for. Just went in, just see what I would qualify for, and they'd either give it to you or they wouldn't. And
so I'm guessing these are just like unsecured lines of credit,
Yep.
Okay, yeah. My in-laws recently bought a rental property, and a couple weeks before or a couple days before closing, they all of a sudden didn't the loan they were going to do fell apart, and they couldn't do it, and they ended up just going to a local bank and going in there and just getting an unsecured line of credit that covered the entire property. Like, it purchased the entire deal, like no money down. Wow. And it was just an unsecured line of credit.
Explain, guys, what unsecured means to the people who don't get it.
Yeah, it just means that there's no asset that they can, claim if you default on it. It's just based off your personal credit and, however they want to underwrite you and whatever they're willing to lend you. I mean, it's essentially like a credit card, with a certain limit, except, it's usually in the 5 to 8% interest.
Got it.
Cool. All right. So you bought this first property, like 2 commercial spaces. Like, what was that like getting them rented out? Cause I'll be honest. Like, I'm freaked out a little bit about commercial properties because I have this fear that I'm going to buy one and then it's going to sit empty for 4 years. Cause there's areas, I see commercial buildings in my area that have been empty for 4, 5, 10 years.
Yeah. I don't own that building anymore. And, everything worked out. I had the right connections at the time. I was in the community. And even right before I bought it, I knew there was like the largest space, like used to be a bakery and it became a restaurant. Like, I knew there was a new restaurant coming to town looking for a place, and I knew I could sell them on the space, even though I hadn't even closed on it or bought it yet. Like, he was interested enough. He was willing to wait until I've finished it up. And, but yeah, looking back, I wouldn't recommend doing commercial for especially your first investment.
Yeah.
I don't have any plans on doing any additional commercial. What helped was there were all the little apartments too. So even if I was sitting empty in the commercial space, I could probably still break even on the building.
How many apartments were there?
There were 12 little apartments.
Oh, wow.
They were like, they were kind of one step above homelessness.
Oh, wow.
Most of the tenants came from like the Catholic Charity Services and other places like that. There were 4 apartments that were like 1 bedroom with their own kitchen and bath, and then the other 8 were 4 in a hallway, like 2 rooms, and they shared a bathroom at the end of the hall.
Okay.
Got it.
Interesting.
And so like all, I don't know if you remember the numbers, but like what kind of cash flow was that thing generating, and how much did you sell it for, and why'd you sell it ultimately?
Well, I sold it because somebody came to me and asked me if I wanted to sell it. Then they gave me a price that was made it willing to sell. I think we had just over, right around or just over 7,000 in gross rents. There were a lot of really high expenses with that, like over $1,000 a month in utilities. But when it was full up and I wasn't having to continually improve, it cash flowed very, very well. But for the first year or so, it all just went to paying off the lines of credit that I used to get it up and going. And then when I sold it, I actually used all that cash to pay off my business loans so that I could eventually sell that flower shop, and which I did 2 years ago. And, I had to seller finance that as well. So
nice.
Okay.
All right. So before we move on, you're 200K and you paid 140, you're 60, and, you're doing 7K in gross rents. What'd you end up getting out of that thing for?
I was able to sell it for 285, and I would say all in, I was probably about 220, 30,
Okay, so
somewhere in.
Not a bad
First deal. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
no.
didn't lose money. You learned.
I held it for a few years, made some good money in the interim, and and then it allowed me to sell my day job.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. So what came next? Actually, before I ask you that, let's go to the end of your story. How many total units do you have now? And then we're going to go back to what came next.
Okay, I have a total of 141 rental units across 58 properties.
Wow. Okay, so you've done a lot in the last few years. So let's go back then.
Yeah.
And say, how did you get there? Walk us through the next few deals that you bought.
Okay, yeah. So in 2011, I bought a couple duplexes and 2 houses that I ended up just flipping the houses. Just picked up some cheap foreclosures, and and then just a couple duplexes that year, and then the next year like a 6 unit and a few houses, and just kept adding whenever I could. I had no set plan. It was like, I want to add this many here, this many here. It was just when the right deal was there, I'd do whatever it took to get it done.
Nice.
That's cool. So you were looking at residential properties mostly.
Yes.
I'm assuming only. You weren't doing commercial anymore.
It's got the 6.
No commercial anymore.
Okay. And how are you finding them? How are you funding them?
Pretty much all of them came from the MLS.
Okay.
Except there was a set of 3 homes that the bank that I worked with contacted me. It was like, hey, we have these 3 homes. You want to buy them from us in a little package deal, and we'll set it up like this. So other than that, all those first mini deals just came just off the MLS. And I would usually try the BRRRR method. I didn't know that term at the time, but the value add, and I would use just traditional financing, 70%, 75% loan to value, and use my lines of credit for oftentimes even the down payment for that and the rehab costs, and then refinance it after. And
That's cool.
Repeat.
Yep.
Over and over and over.
Awesome.
Yep. I forgot the repeat.
Yeah. Hey, so on those 3 homes, that's interesting. We've certainly had people on the show who have had similar things. In your case, again, somebody listening is like, oh, that's so cool. Like, how great would it be if all of a sudden like the bank came to me and was telling me about properties that they wanted to get rid of? I'm like, you don't even have to negotiate with other people. You don't have to fight for it. You just negotiate direct with the bank. So how does one position themselves, or at least how did you position yourself in a way that became a possibility?
Yeah. So this bank that gave them to me, they were, it's a bank that I have pretty much used for all of my stuff except some of the lines of credit. Those were established other places, but as far as all of my real estate loans, I mean, they have almost every single one of them. And so I just had the relationship of continuing to buy, and they got their payments every month. And anytime I was rehabbing, I had it, done within a reasonable amount of time, and, done to the level that I said I was going to do it. So, I mean, I just always followed through on whatever, whether it be the loan or they did finance a couple of my, partially finance some of the rehabs that I did as well. And, I was always on schedule and on budget. And so, yeah, it was just the relationship built after proving myself and paying them a lot of money every month.
That's cool. And I think so much of like businesses like that, right? Like if you do what you say you're going to do and you prove yourself dependable, people are going to want to work with you. We talked about that last week, I think, or maybe 2 weeks ago on the podcast about, open up a checking account with the bank that you eventually want to work with and start talking with them and building those relationships, kind of like you did at the beginning with the lines of credit. So I think that's wise. So let's talk about, like you mentioned earlier, you didn't really have a plan or a strategy. You were just kind of buying. I mean, like did that happen? Like, did you ever actually say, okay, now I'm going to be committed to doing this a certain way? Or have you always just kind of acquired your properties just kind of as they came?
Well, I mean, I always knew I was playing the long game. So I had my long goal of the financial freedom. And to do that, I want to be maximizing my cash on cash return. And so if the deal wasn't there, especially like for the value add, or because I also knew, the BRRRR method, I knew that's how I was going to move the fastest. So if there wasn't the deal where I could purchase it and get it fixed up and get the right rents to get it refinanced, if those deals weren't there, I would just sit around and wait till they did. I think some people get caught up in like, I want this many properties by this date and this many properties by this date. And I mean, I guess if you're buying turnkey, I mean, I wouldn't do that, but whatever. But it all depends on, that end goal. And with my end goal being the financial freedom, actually in 2015, I didn't buy a single property because I just didn't find any deals that I liked.
Nice.
Really?
Okay. So, I got a number of questions. One, you poo-pooed turnkey really quick. Why is that?
I mean, I think if you want to be, it would never have served my goals. I don't see the rent to purchase ratios that I would ever be interested in. The lack of control, you don't have the, the hands-on, you don't get to add the value. You don't get to force the appreciation and, force the rental increases. I mean, you're just giving money and letting somebody else do completely everything.
Yeah.
And I think
Makes sense.
I'm less than 7 years. Well, at the time we're recording this, less than 7 years from purchasing my first property, and and we're financially free. We have 141 units, and that's definitely not going to happen with trying to be a passive turnkey investor.
Well, so how do you mind? How old are you? Like how old did you when you got financial freedom? Like were you?
32.
32. I mean, that's really good. Like a lot of people are listening to this and they're like, man, I'm like 50 years old and I still don't have it.
Look, I know where you're going, Brandon. I want to dip in for a second.
Go ahead.
Because before you go to where you're going to go, I want to make sure that there's like financially free is kind of a fuzzy word, right? Or set of words.
Yeah.
Like financial freedom for you is going to be different than financial freedom for Brandon, who has a car habit, who's financially free is different for, somebody else, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, financially free for one guy, maybe, you know, ramen noodles every night and you know, never going out on a date with his spouse and maybe every 5 to 10 years taking a day off. Right. So for everyone listening, like there are tiers of financial freedom. Obviously, Austin, I'm assuming that you went and said, hey, what is my lifestyle? How much do we spend? How much do we need to live how we want to live? And your financial freedom is how much I need to make every month in order to achieve the lifestyle that I'm happy with, correct?
Right, exactly. We started with not even like, you know, what's our lifestyle now? We thought about, okay, if we weren't working, what would our ideal day, week, month, and year look like? And we just mapped out the ideal, or what we thought would be ideal or close to ideal. And then we reverse engineered, and then we'd be like, okay, so if we wanted to go out to eat this many times a week, okay, we average probably this much between the meal and a couple drinks, and so that would be this much. And so we didn't think about the budget at all. We thought about we designed the lifestyle that we would want, and then calculated how much that would cost.
That's awesome. I love it. I think it's fantastic, and I think everyone should do it. Frankly, what's funny is like I'm on another document writing, Julie, we need to sit down and write how much we really need to make every month. Which is like, yeah, we've never done that. We've always kind of like, oh, okay. You know, we should know, like, hey, you know, your kids are in high school. Do you want to pay for a private school? You know, college, are you going to pay for college? How are you going to pay for college? All that stuff. You know, the vacations, all the trips, all that stuff, like really mapping that out so you can think it through. I'm assuming you did that. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And, you know, before we had done that, you know, I had just picked some arbitrary target, and I don't know if I was saying 150 or 200,000 a year kind of post-tax or whatever. But then I started thinking, I was like, well, what, like, yeah, we need to sit down and actually calculate what the number is. And when we mapped out our ideal lifestyle, and I mean, and this has like $1,500 a month for travel. We even talked, okay, how many bottles of wine or bourbon do we want to go through in a month? Like, okay, what's that going to tally up to? And we did that, and we came out, you know, around 84,000 a year, you know, way less than I had initially thought that I would want to live kind of my happiest existence per se. So
that's cool.
It's fantastic.
You know what I love about real estate is that like real estate investing gives you the ability to like work backwards, you know, from, okay, now that I've got that target monthly income or target annual income, how many rental properties is that? Like what cash on cash return do I need? Or what, you know, if I buy 100 units and I'm averaging $100 per month per unit, that's, you know, 10 grand a month. There, I did it. You know, like very few investments you can do. I mean, I could go buy Tesla stock, you know, and I could hope that it goes up in price. And I'm not saying people shouldn't buy stocks, but like there's just something really cool about real estate being able to work backwards to a number that says, this is what I need to do. This is how I'm going to get there. This is, you know, like, I love that stuff.
Yeah. I'm going to say, you know, I'm going to just cut you off, Brandon.
Cut me off.
Say,
too much. I've had
you
too
can't,
much tonight.
Yeah, too much to drink. No, you can do that with stocks, but in a market like now, you can't. I mean, it's the same thing. Look, appreciation versus dividends, right? I mean, dividends are kind of the same thing as rental income. It's, you know, ideally it's predictable. There's companies with long track records of growing dividends, things like that. You have the control in this case, and dividends, you know, if you're lucky, you get a 4% dividend from a stock versus real estate where you can get that, you know, much higher cash on cash. But like, you know, I don't want to 1,000% poo-poo stocks and tell people stocks are terrible. But Austin,
I don't own any.
I don't know.
Look, we're not going to get into this debate.
Yeah. Interesting point. I did do the math on how much cash it would have taken me to, if I were invested in the market over the 7 years to hit this goal. And, you know, there's the 25 time rule or the 4% rule, meaning you need 25 times whatever your annual income needs are in a stock portfolio in order for an indefinite retirement. And if I would have, it would have been like $1.65 million that I would have had to put in personally over 7 years, because there's no, you know, you're not getting hardly any compounding benefits in that time. And
how much?
And
how
I only
much,
have $150,000 of my own money into real estate.
Yeah, and that's where I would say the biggest benefit to real estate. Why? Yeah, right. Is like the ability to not necessarily do like no money down or low money down, but to pull cash out, to be able to put it into different things, to get creative with the financing, to bring in partners, to bring in banks, the BRRRR strategy, all that stuff. You know, like when people compare, hey, I'm getting 10% on my investment from, you know, whatever stock, like that's great. Like I'm getting an infinite return on my investment because I put nothing into a deal. You know, so you're making $100 a month. I'm making $100 a month, but you put whatever tens of thousands of dollars into a deal. I put nothing. You know, so like, and again, it's not one way or the other. Like it all works, but that's one thing I like about it.
Hey, before we move on, I know Brandon, you've got one or two questions. I've got the last thing I'm really thinking about here is, okay, and I think we should ask this question more because of just sheer timing. KC market's been pretty slow and steady. It's been pretty reserved and safe over a fairly decent amount of time. What do you do if the market turns? I mean, you know, people are talking that the market's a little toppy in lots of areas. Lots of investors are starting to, you know, have really leveraged themselves out. So, you know, if the market drops X percent, you know, we start seeing rents start to fall, things happen. How do you deal with that? Have you thought about that? Have you planned for that, or you see it when it comes?
You know, with most of my rentals, I mean, the rent rates are not going to really drop. I'm not in high-end rentals. I mean, I probably averaged around maybe $750 a month in per unit in rent. So in that tier, like your rents aren't going to drop a lot. And so if the market turns, which, you know, there will be a correction at some point. I mean, it's always going through cycles. I don't know if that's coming now or another 5 years or, you know, will never try to predict that. Sure. All I hope is that I have quite a bit of capital available at that time to buy as much as I can. Yeah. I mean, that's my plan for it going down, is to just acquire as much as I can, because I'm a long-term buy and hold for the financial freedom and passive income. So the only time the market value of my properties matters is if I'm going to sell it or refinance it.
Yeah. Yep. So what is, let's define that long-term, because, you know, some people are like, oh, I'm a long-term buy and hold, and it's every 3 years. Well, you know, that's obviously not long-term, but what is long-term as you see it? Life? Is it Warren Buffett? I buy it with the expectation I'm never going to sell it.
Very possibly. Yeah. I have no intentions of. I've got good teams in place, and so it only takes me probably an hour a week worth of work to stay on top of everything. So
wow.
So that was actually even my next question. Is, you know, we talk about financial freedom with rental properties, and I would say, well, you know, if you own 100 rental units, that's not, you know, that's 40, 50, 60 hours a week of work, isn't it? But like, how are you doing that with so little work?
I mean, I have really good property managers. I mean, that's the biggest key. I mean, that's where all your work is. And so since I trust them and they do a good job, you know, the majority of my monthly work is just on the back end bookkeeping side, updating QuickBooks for every LLC that I have, and, you know, then answering just a couple questions here and there for the property managers on any bigger issues that might have come up. And other than that, you know, I trust them to just go with it. And my main property manager actually started that company because I didn't trust the ones at the time. And so I started that company, and then I recruited these people and was like, hey, this business would be perfect for you guys. And here's why. And, you know, they saw it, and they've grown it like crazy. And so it's worked out for all of us.
Okay. So did I mishear you? You said you started your own property management firm because you couldn't find a competent property management firm where you were. And then you found managers to come and fill the boat. So how many managers do you have working at your firm?
Oh, no, it's not my, it's not my firm
so
at all.
I misunderstood it. Okay.
I started it up and got it up to about 50 some units. And I had an employee that was handling quite a bit of it, but he left. And so I was kind of at a crossroads between my other business, trying to do my own real estate thing and with rehabs and the other business and everything else. I was like, okay, so I've got to really kind of figure it out here. And so at that point, I actually decided to sell the business.
Got it.
If I could. And I went to these people that I would trust with my properties and, convince them that it was the right business for them.
Got it. So how do you find a good property manager? Because, if you're that hands off, I mean, you wholeheartedly trust these guys. How do you vet these people? How do you find somebody who's qualified to do it, at least for you?
I had a personal relationship with these people. I mean, the ones that I sold the business to. So I have not had to actively search for a new property manager at any other time. So I haven't had to actually go through that process. But it would just come back to knowing what all goes into property management. And then, I would say interviewing the people. And if you know what all goes into it, you can reverse engineer that too and know what to expect, what questions to ask, what might be red flags. And it's definitely one of the trickier parts in the industry.
Yeah. All right. So you buy a number of properties a year. You've got your property management set. You said your hours on accounting. Obviously, you're spending your time also on the acquisition side. Is that just kind of kind of passive, I'll spend 20 minutes looking at the MLS to see if something new pops up? How are you kind of finding your deals, or at least from a time perspective?
Yeah, so the hour a week is my maintenance time. That's not my new acquisition time. That hour a week's just the monthly bookkeeping and the year-end tax stuff and all of that combined out. On the acquisition side, even though we've reached our financial freedom, I'm just doing this because I like doing it. So it's more, I don't time any of that. I love just sitting down, clicking through and looking at properties and kind of running through possibilities. The difference is I'm looking at larger packages and portfolios now. So those are, much fewer than trying to sit down and look at every duplex. But I still will do that because one of my largest deal came from, there was one property on the market. I looked it up and I always do a tax search. And I knew this person owned a lot of property. And so it was kind of a red flag for why he might be selling just the one. So I called around till somebody gave me his personal cell phone number, and I called him up and talked to him. And he's like, well, yeah, we're looking to retire in the next 3 to 5 years, and we'll probably be unloading, everything over time. I was like, well, that's great, because I would rather do a package deal. And we ended up buying, 80 units from him.
Oh, wow.
Wow, 80 units from one person.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Was that all in one, was it a portfolio of houses, or was it a bunch of properties, or what was that?
It had everything from single family houses up to a 24 unit.
Wow. And how did you
unit?
Let's talk about putting together that deal. That's pretty impressive. I mean, first of all, how did you approach that with him in terms of, hey, do you have anything more I can buy? Hey, can I buy your portfolio?
Can I step back one? Step back one, Brandon? So you said you did a tax search. For somebody who's brand new, who's never done that. All right, you're looking at this property. You said you'd do a tax search on every property. What does that mean, and how does one do that?
Yeah, you just get on it's usually just going to be on your county's website, and you can search the property address, and it'll give you the valuation according to the county, the property tax, the annual property taxes paid, and it'll also give you the owner's information.
Got it. So now you know the owner's name. How do you get the owner's cell phone?
I call up my contacts at banks and that know him, and other contacts till somebody is like, oh yeah, I've got his information. I started with just asking for his email, but the person that gave me the information was like, Sometimes he's a little slower on the email. Just call his cell phone. Here you go.
Yeah. So you're calling, but there's tons of banks out there. How do you know what banks to call? How do you know what people to talk to see if you can even get there?
Yeah. The community I'm in right on the edge of Kansas City is a smaller community. So there's only a few community banks in the area. So it wasn't too hard. And just being in, it's Leavenworth, Kansas, which, is about 50,000 people.
Yeah.
People just know people. It's like just small enough.
So the logic that you presume is this, right? It's, hey, this guy's got a lot of properties. He's obviously an active real estate investor, or was at some point. If he got to the point where he has that many properties, he either had a ton of money on his own or he had to work with the local banks. Let me start with the banks and see if they can help me out.
Yep.
Okay. I just again, so folks who don't understand this can follow the line of thinking. That makes a lot of sense, and that's great. So you get to this guy, Brandon. Now take over from your questions.
Well, yeah. So how does that conversation go? Like, if somebody's listening to the show right now that wants to do it the same kind of process, what should they do?
I just called him and said, hey, this is who I am. I see you have this property over here at this address for sale. Do you mind if I ask why you're selling? And that's when he said, well, yeah, we're looking to retire in this amount of time, and we'll be slowly unloading things over the next 3 to 5 years. And told my wife we'd move to Florida after we retire. So
nice.
It was just kind of an awkward little conversation with somebody I hadn't met before. And
well, what's interesting about contacting landlords or other investors about real estate is that, if you contact a homeowner, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to want to sell because they like living in their houses. But if you contact most investors, most investors are willing to sell if the price is right. And for a lot of them, people are just not good at being landlords. I'm not saying that guy was or wasn't, but a lot of people are really, really terrible at owning rental properties, and they have headaches, and they don't have systems, and they're not good at what they do. They don't listen to the BiggerPockets podcast. So I suggest to newbies all the time, if you're having trouble finding deals, a very simple thing you can do, even if you have no money at all, is go on Craigslist, go onto the actual for rent listings. And landlords are on there. Look for the mom and pop landlords. They give you their phone number in the ad. How much easier can you get? They're here, look for the crappy ads on there that is 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment, and call them and do it on a weekly basis. Set up a time every week for 2 hours. You do nothing but call the landlords on your area, and I bet you half of them will entertain a conversation about selling because they suck at being a landlord.
Yeah,
so
it's great.
That's a great idea.
Hey, Austin. On that package, I don't need to know all the details. So, you said 80 units, but what presumably you buy something like that, you're going to get some kind of discount for that package. You're not paying retail for the property. So, all said, what kind of discount did you get for that monster portfolio?
Well, I don't even remember what his first price that he threw out for everything, because he started with a whole list of stuff, and I went and drove by every property and scratched a few of them off, and then I just kind of put together the packages I wanted and said I would pay this for it, and we went back and forth. So it's hard to say what
I guesstimate from retail. Let's assume retail, and then 80%,
I would say
80% of retail.
Yeah, probably around there. Maybe even a touch under. But
it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Nice job. Well done, man.
Yeah, that's very cool. So
thanks.
Awesome.
All right, before we move on to the fire round, I'm curious, where are you headed next, and what's your? I know you're saying you do this now.
It's retired, baby.
You're
I'm
retired,
done.
but
yeah, but I still love it.
Yeah, we love it.
I just closed on a 32-unit deal 1 month ago. Yeah.
Really? What was that deal? Where was that at, in the same area?
Up in the same area, and it was a seller that, they had listed everything on the MLS at once, and I was probably one of the only or few that came with an offer to buy it all. It was 8 properties, 32 units. So And this one might actually be, I think by the end, the best deal that I've done.
Really? Let's talk about that. I mean, what were the numbers like on that?
Current rents are $16,700 a month. Picked it up for $1,062,000. And if we put about 150 to 180,000 in total, I can get the rents up to about 24,000 a month.
Wow.
And so, we would be right at about 1.25 all in for the purchase and the value add. But a lot of that value add we're going to be able to pay for out of cash flow as well over the first 2 years.
You've increased
from
50%.
Yeah.
That's
from
gonna be awesome.
Just under 17,000 to about 24,000. So
that's great, man.
So yeah, I'm only spending 100. It was already at a pretty decent ratio, but then I'm only spending 180,000 for an additional 7,000 in rent.
So how did you how do you put together a financing on a big package like that?
I work with a portfolio lender.
Okay.
For those of you listening, that's the banks that service all their investment loans in-house as opposed to selling them off. They have more flexibility in what they're doing. You usually probably pay maybe an extra 0.25% or whatever, but the ease of getting through the system is so much easier, because if the guy making this decision to loan you the money likes the deal, that's all it really takes.
Yeah.
And again, I've been working largely with the same bank over time. So I even called up the VP that I work with there and just said, hey, I'm about to submit this offer that just came on the market today. Would you shoot me over a pre-approval letter for this? He's like, well, yeah, it'll say subject to like appraisal and board approval since it was over a certain amount. I'm like, that's fine. The seller, it's just going to look like a pre-approval letter from the seller. To the seller. And so I'm just looking for any little advantage to get the deal locked up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that.
Awesome.
What'd you have to put for down payment on that?
Oh yeah.
We put just like 106,000.
Okay. Wow.
You put 106K, so you did 10% down.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great.
That came over time too. After the years of proving myself with the bank, they would start doing things where if I could buy correctly, they would lend 70% of the appraised value as long as I put a minimum 10% down. So if I was buying under 80% of the appraised value, they'd let me purchase with just 10% down.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And again, another benefit of working with like portfolio lenders, the small local banks that can do that and be creative, they'll work things like that because it's a win-win for them.
Yeah, and at the beginning you just get your typical loans from them and everything else, but as long as you keep proving yourself, it opens up some other doors like that.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's one thing that I should have done a lot more of. I've done a lot of like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac mortgages, and I would shop around trying to find the cheapest rate everywhere. Looking back, I should have just picked one good lender, one good bank, and probably done the majority of my stuff with them. Because the thing I hate most about real estate really is like paperwork and having to get mortgages and refinances and all that. That stuff drives me nuts. But when you work with a good lender, like they have your information. it's worth the 0.25% or 0.5% you might pay extra.
Yeah. At the end of the year, when I get my taxes, I email my new taxes to them so they have them on file. And then maybe if I've bought anything, I update my schedule of real estate owned, and that's all I ever have to do for them.
Yeah, I love that.
Amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about our business. We work with one of the monster mega banks, and everything is a pain in the ass.
Yep.
Everything is a pain in the ass. And why do I do this? I just need to work with a local bank. We've got a great business. They will be so much more amenable to everything that I need and want and ask for. And all right, whatever. I'm I'm on it. I'm on it. All right, Austin, this is great.
Yes.
Thank you. Fantastic stuff. I think it's time, man. What do you think, Brandon?
I think it's time for the world famous Fire Round.
It's time for the Fire Round.
All right, let's get to today's Fire Round. These questions, of course, come direct out of the BiggerPockets forums, which our listeners can get to by going to biggerpockets.com/forums. And just a quick tip for people. I actually think this is kind of cool. If you go to the forums and you go to the navigation bar when you're there, there's a little option that says trending, which is kind of cool. So if you guys are like, what's the most trending, popular stuff going on in the forums, go check it out sometime. It's kind of cool. That's where actually I get a lot of these questions from. So anyway, number 1, I'm looking for advice. We have a rental property which is infested with German cockroaches because the tenants are unclean. My property manager visited and sprayed the place, but it was not effective. He saw food all around the house and the general condition was filthy. Now we are planning to get pest control company to take immediate action, but is there a way to penalize a tenant for failing to upkeep the property?
So I got to ask a quick question before you even answer.
No, this was not my question, but
because Austin's rocking headphones with the red and black stripes of Germany, and you happen to pick a question talking about German roaches, man. That's kind of messed up.
I'm guessing it a little more aggressive and bigger and stronger.
I guess so. Anyway, wow. So what do you do about the? Do you make the tenants pay for them, or what do you do?
Man, I mean that all is going to depend on your state's landlord-tenant laws, how your lease is written up. I mean, there's so many factors that are going to go into what you can actually do in that case. But
what would you do? You get a call from your property manager who tells you that problem. What do you do?
Yeah, we would pay to spray it, but we'd also, let them know, hey, like they're on thin ice. I think we do have some clauses in there that would that amount of uncleanliness would be considered kind of a breach of the lease, and we would be able to get them out pretty quickly if we wanted to.
Yeah, nice. That's actually happened to me a few times with the roaches, and it's always because not in my house, in my tenant's house. And it's always because it's really nasty living conditions. We'll usually at that point, like the first time we might pay to spray, but we even in our leases now it says after 30 days it's your responsibility, so we'll bill them if they don't pay it. But then we usually just ask them to leave. We'll just give them notice, hey, you're out.
Sometimes, if your houses are close together, if you spray this house over, or if, your neighbor had cockroaches and they sprayed here, it usually doesn't kill them. What it does is they, and so sometimes you can end up with roaches and it's not even a uncleanliness thing. It's like, oh, my neighbor was really dirty.
Yeah. Hey, Brandon, and those roaches were German roaches. They were actually pit bulls. So
I believe you. All right.
All right, next question. Soon, many of us, quote, newbies will be making their first moves in the REI world. It's quite a daunting idea that seems to overwhelm a lot of first-time buyers for various reasons. One reason that I've recently run into while searching for my first MFH home in Louisville, is that let's see, must be. Yeah. I don't know. Let's see. What exactly gives me a competitive advantage? Okay, so that's the question. Yeah. What sets me apart from the experienced investors in my area? How can I get a good deal when I'm going out against the big dogs? How does somebody new compete against somebody like you in trying to acquire a property?
I mean, you don't. I mean,
you will lose.
I mean, I'm not going to go sit down with the chess masters of the world and be like, hey, how do I and expect to get an advantage on these, people that have put in so many hours of study. I mean, what you need to do is, to improve your chances. I mean, you're not ever going to have a competitive advantage against a pro. I mean, that's just probably not going to happen. But all of us that are pros started as complete novices and beginners too.
Yep.
So, it's about the amount of time you put in. So with your study and knowledge and education and, especially in today's market, I think that speed is probably the number one factor.
Yep.
In just getting that offer in, like when you see that great deal that, he's alluding to in this post, you have to be confident enough to act quickly and get your offer in to have a chance. 'Cause guys like me, I will just see it and I'm like, yep, I know that's a great deal. Here's my offer without even going to see the property and shoot it in. And
Yep.
So
I'm the
yeah,
same
you
way.
just.
You got to be quick.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Nicely done. Very
All
good.
right. Next question is the one I meant to copy and paste into our document here. But I'm currently a senior in college, and I'm giving thought to where I want to live once I graduate in May. I want to invest in buy and hold properties with good cash flow, and I've heard Austin's a good place to live, but the market's too saturated. So I want to pick a good real estate city because I want to invest full time there. Where would you invest if you could move anywhere in the country?
Where would I, or what should I?
Where should they?
Or would I be like, where should they?
Yeah, if you're giving them advice, where should they move to if they can go anywhere in the country? They're open book, like it's blank slate.
I would say move wherever you're going to be happiest living.
Okay.
Like,
and figure out a strategy that works.
Even if it adds like an extra couple years onto your, acquisition time for your goals, who cares if you're enjoying those 2 years a lot more than just going out and living in some miserable little place because that you don't enjoy at all. Like
insert Detroit joke here, Josh.
Says the guy who's financially free and doesn't have to worry about it. No, I'm just kidding. No, but you found a place that you lived in where that can happen, right?
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is like, hey, don't just go to, as Brandon says, Detroit, because you can buy property for very little, hopefully still, or hopefully not still, and make a good yield from it. If you would hate living in Detroit, don't go to Detroit, right? Go find some city on the map that you're happy at. Exactly.
Yeah. I probably could have retired even sooner but there were things like we did big trips, traveling. I'm not the, what's the analogy? Like, I'm not going to be the guy that gives up a glass of wine now for the promise of 140 years from now in retirement. Like, no, you can figure out a way to do all things. Like,
fair enough.
I like that.
Excellent.
I like that. Yeah, I think people oftentimes will, like, we get into real estate because we want financial freedom, but then you work for 20 years flipping houses and wholesaling and all this, and at the end of the day, like, what did you really do? Like you take your eye off the end game. And anyway, that's about life now and life later. So cool. All right, last question of the fire.
Last question. With so many landlords on here, and he's referring to on BiggerPockets, and so many good tips always being shared for newbie landlords. I'm curious, what has personally been the best few pieces of advice that you've gotten as a landlord? So what are your best landlord tips that people have given to you?
Well, you've got to, these are more just from my experience. I can't remember anything from, books were my mentor. That was all I used. I think the biggest thing is just making sure you treat it like a business, that every part of it is business. At the beginning, I was proud to own real estate, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm the owner of this duplex, and, felt proud about that when I was, 25 or 6, and I had these rental properties and everything. And man, when they know you're the owner, that's when they want to come and be like, oh, well, can you just grant us some leniency on this one month? We promise this will be it. And not charge us the late fee. And, you want to be a compassionate person. And so you grant that, and then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And so that was when I just started saying, nope, I am the property manager.
Yep.
And again, just treating everything like a business.
Yep. I think that's smart. I think it's very smart. I think people, and on that, I know this is fire round, so we gotta be quick, but on that note, people are the compassionate thing, right? Like, a lot of people think like to be a landlord, I don't know, like it's a jerk to enforce the lease, or you're being a jerk if you're going to enforce a late fee, but you want to be nice. But
and you're not, but they will make you feel like that.
Yeah. But ultimately, like, I like to think of it now this way. Like, when you enforce a late fee, you're charging someone $50 or whatever. That's actually helping the tenant. In almost every case, it helps the tenant, because if you don't do that, like, their human tenant nature is to, like, they pay late one month. The next month, if you let them off, they're going to pay late again. And like, you become a lower priority, and eventually it ends with an eviction. And so, like, you're saving them by $50. You're saving them from eventually getting evicted. Yeah. And you're keeping them honest, I guess, is how I look at it. You're training them. And maybe
building character.
They were not, quote, trained or had little character beforehand. And it's helpful. So and some people have said, well, you're being dishonest by telling somebody you're not the owner, but you're the manager. If you're the manager and the owner, look,
if you're putting the tenant in and advertising it for lease, are you not the manager?
No, that's exactly right.
That's the role you're in. And
no, I think what you're saying is like, look, there's, I'm not accusing you of it. I'm just saying like, this is a debate that we've heard. Yeah. So it's, look, there's disclosure and there's like, oh, I also have $683,052 in the bank. I also have X, Y, and Z. There's disclosure, and then there's like, you don't need to know who owns the building. I'm the manager, so that's all you need to know.
With Class A rentals, and you're talking $1,500, $2,500 a month in rent. Those are the easiest ones to manage. I mean, so that's really easy to be like, I'm the owner. When you start getting down into these, CEC plus properties, B minus properties, those tenants are a lot tougher to manage, and it's just a lot easier to have that separated out.
Awesome.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, let's get to our last segment of the show, which we lovingly refer to as our Famous Four. All right. These are the 4 same questions we ask every guest every week. Number 1, out of all the real estate books you've read, what is your favorite real estate related book?
Obviously, as talked about how I got started, I've got to give it to Rich Dad Poor Dad, as probably 80% of your podcast guests do. But without that book, I don't know if or when I would have ever even started down this path.
Awesome. Right. Awesome. Hey, Brandon, when was the last time you read that book?
Yeah, probably a year ago.
Oh, really?
I try to read it once a year.
I don't think I've read it in like 10 years. Probably
you should reread it
once in a while.
Yeah. It's good for like inspiring. Oh yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. All right. Favorite business book.
Okay. So this one is a little bit off the wall. I gave some thought to this. It's actually a psychology book. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's all about how the human mind processes and makes decisions. And oftentimes you think that you're being completely rational without even knowing that all of these other influences and biases are there. And so I think going through that book and really being aware of what's happening in your mind when you think you're being rational and might not be, I think it can help you make a lot better decisions. And then also it can, by knowing what's going on in other people's minds too, it might also provide some other opportunities to exploit some situations and, hedge out a little bit better deal and things like that.
Very cool. And of course, you can go to biggerpockets.com/richdad to get a link to Amazon for that, or biggerpockets.com/thinkingfast to get a link to that book. So
awesome.
Anyway, we thought make it easier on people. Perfect.
What do you do for fun, man? What are the hobbies outside of real estate, obviously, which I can tell you clearly do for fun now?
It's all fun for now. But yeah, I mean, I love traveling and hiking. I'm building out an overland vehicle, but yeah, actually just a week and a half ago, I was driving through Denver to go do a backpacking loop out Maroon Bells.
Oh, nice.
Here after I get off here, I'm going to pick up my wife from the airport. She's been in South Africa with her best friend for 2.5 weeks. So, I mean, the traveling and hiking, I mean, just any type of experience.
Sweet. Awesome. Sounds great.
All right. My last question of the day. Austin, what do you believe sets apart successful real estate investors from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
Yes, I've given, obviously with my favorite business book being a psychology book, I've given a lot of thought to this just over the time too, but especially knowing that you were going to be asking me this. And in my opinion, it all comes down to the word why. I think it starts with the big why, as for, starting with kind of that end goal and reverse engineering. And, if you have a real reason outside of I just want some extra money, but if you have a real reason and why you're doing it, all of the persistence, discipline, effort, energy, and trade-offs you have to make are really easy to do because you know why you're doing it. And so I think that weeds out the people that don't get started or quit. And then I think the difference between the most successful is they know the little whys behind why am I using this expense percentage for this type of property or this for this, and why am I not doing this, and why is this the best strategy for me? and why aren't these the best? Knowing that theory as opposed to just trying to follow some playbook.
Details.
Yeah.
Experience. Yeah.
Good
That's
answer.
awesome.
I like that.
I like it. All right, man, before we let you go, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, I have a blog, goodlifein10.com. Instagram, Facebook, same thing, goodlifein10. And that's
awesome.
TEN. Yeah.
Not the
Cool.
number 10. Cool. Good life.
All right,
in 10.
Austin.
I like it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This is a great show. A lot of really, really cool little details. Congrats on all the success you've had so far. Good luck going forward, and we appreciate you coming on board.
Sweet. Thanks for having me.
All right.
problem.
Thanks, Austin.
All right, guys, that was Austin Fruechting. Big thanks to Austin again for coming on the show. That was great, man. It's good to be back. Wow.
Yeah, it was a good episode for you to come back on because, it's, I don't know, it was a really, really good episode in terms of especially like knowing that you can reverse engineer financial freedom with real estate.
Yes.
And it was like hearing a real life example of how that happened. I know it inspires me, and I'm sure it inspires like a lot of you guys listening. Like, go out there and do it for yourself. What do you need? Jot down exactly how much you need to make. How many properties is that? And work backwards and go get it. Like, you can do it.
Yep. And like I said, if you know somebody who is looking for financial freedom, I think this is a great motivator. So get out there, share it. Tell them to go to biggerpockets.com/show239. Listen to this podcast, and that's it. It's good to be here.
I don't know if it's good for you to be here, but it's all right having you back. Are you coughing? Do you have the black?
I was muting. I
think you have the black lung.
That's great. Yeah, I caught something up in one of those parks that I was at.
Yeah, you caught something, all right.
I did. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, listen, again, great to be back. Actually, funny story. Not that funny a story, but
more
my
blue sludge.
My youngest had fallen off the couch yesterday. She was playing around and fell off and bonked her head. I ended up having to take her to the hospital, check her out. We're going through, just everything. And, all the doctors were amazing at Children's Hospital as always. And before I leave, this woman's like, hey, got to tell you something. I love BiggerPockets. I love it. And she's an active real estate investor. She absolutely 1,000% professional. And, as we were leaving, shared with me how she's doing and what she's doing. And it's great. It's so cool to hear people, following their dreams and taking action and making things happen. So that was the sunny side of a not so great story, but my daughter's fine. She's slight concussion, but, anyway, running into the doc. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. But it's always weird to run into BiggerPockets. What we need, BiggerPockets people everywhere. What we need is t-shirts. We need everybody to have a t-shirt that says like, I'm a BiggerPockets member, right? I'm a BiggerPocket. What's the name we give to I'm a BiggerPocketeer. And
we need a name. So if you've
have
got
a name,
clever ideas for a name, let us know. Jump on Twitter, jump on our Facebook, jump on the forums, wherever you do. Tag me, tag Brandon. Let us know your ideas. And we've got some great shirt designs, and I know Mindy is working on some things to get those, make them available for everybody. But actually, that'd be interesting. What should we call ourselves?
I mean, with what have we at 800,000 members now, and like
millions and
millions of people visiting the site every month. Yeah. Like, man, like you guys probably don't even know it, but like you just walk down the street and like, I don't know, like 1 out of every 100 people you see is probably a BiggerPockets, something like they visit the site recently or they're interested in it, or listen to the podcast, whatever. Like, we're making an impact. So
what's interesting, back to the lady last night, what she said to me, she's like, Josh, here's the issue. Like, first of all, I love BiggerPockets. I tell all my friends, I talk real estate. I try to talk real estate all the time, and they're like so tired of me talking about it. They don't care. They're kind of over it. And she needs a place where she could go and be excited. That's why she comes and hangs out at BP. But like, to your point, like, hey, if we had people out there that you can pick out another pocketeer or whatever the hell. That's a terrible name, by the way.
It is pretty bad.
Anyway, I don't know. Interesting idea.
It is. Well.
Yeah. All right.
Let's get out of here.
Well, good show. Thanks, guys. We'll see you again next week. I'm Josh Dorkin. Signing off.
You're listening to Bigger Pockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.
It's time for the Random Five. Let's jump in real quick here and do our last little segment of the show. Segment? Did I say segment? Segment of the show called our Random Six or 5, 6, 4.
Yeah.
All right.
However many.
These, number one, can you solve a Rubik's Cube?
No,
Ever
All
tried?
right.
not really.
Me neither.
My daughter's really
My
really
ADD
close.
kicks in too. Like,
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, my 8-year-old's really, really close, so I'm excited to see when that happens. What would you do if you won the lottery? $5 million, $10 million, $50 million.
play in real estate more. I don't.
There you go.
I don't.
I expected that answer. Okay, Brandon.
Do you live by any motto or philosophy?
I really like the fortune favors the bold.
Oh, I like that.
That's good. That's good. Do you play in any fantasy sports league?
Fantasy football, yeah,
Nice.
I enjoy
Cool.
that, but that's the only one.
All right.
Cool.
My last of the random six. When do you feel most impatient?
Right now.
When I haven't taken my Adderall, and my ADD kicks in hardcore.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
There you go, man. That's the most honest,
Yeah.
perfect answer we've ever gotten. I love it. I love it.
Glad I could oblige. Shit.
No problem. No problem. Look, you're financially free. So if you could try out any job for a day, is there anything you're always like, oh man, that would be so cool to try out?
A job?
Yeah. Yeah. Job. No.
Good answer.
All right. Fair enough.
You would want to be
man.
like a
That's good.
helicopter pilot or a marine
Yeah, I
for a
mean,
day? Anything cool like that?
I mean, I guess if that's I guess I could be. It would be fun to fly a helicopter. Yes, I mean that seems very different than what job would
A
be.
job,
Okay.
yeah.
Fair
right.
enough. Fair
Okay.
enough.
You know what job I
Yeah.
would do? You know the guy Andy? I think his name's Andy Serkis, who plays like Gollum and also like the Planet of the Apes guy. Anyway,
You were
The
already
little guy
the
with all the
living
ball-
incarnation.
yeah, the thing with
of
the ball,
Gollum.
the thing with the balls all over. You like do the computer.
Yeah, for
gener-
CGI.
Yeah, the CGI. That
Okay.
would be a cool job for a day. Like to be that guy. They're like, okay, we want you to act like a monkey. Okay, I got this. Anyway.
Okay, yeah, that would be fun. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you, Austin.
All right, guys. Thanks.